The stagecoach wheels kicked up dust devils along the rutted Wyoming trail, and Clara Jane Winters pressed her gloved hand against the window frame, watching the endless prairie roll past with a mixture of terror and desperate hope. She had traveled over 1,000 miles from Pennsylvania to Medicine Bow, Wyoming, responding to an advertisement for a mail-order bride placed by a rancher named Yates Xavier. And with every mile that separated her from her old life, the secret she carried grew heavier in her chest. Her stutter, that cruel impediment that had marked her as different since childhood, had cost her 3 potential suitors back east, each one walking away after hearing her struggle through simple pleasantries, their faces shifting from interest to pity, to barely concealed disgust. The year was 1878, and Medicine Bow was still rough territory, a place where the transcontinental railroad had carved civilization from wilderness only a few years prior. Clara had written careful letters to Yates, choosing her words with painstaking precision, never mentioning that speaking them aloud would be an entirely different matter. She had described herself honestly in other ways. 22 years old, brown hair, green eyes, capable of cooking and sewing, raised in a God-fearing household. What she had not written was that her father had died 2 winters ago, that her mother had remarried a man who looked at Clara with eyes that made her skin crawl, that she had nowhere else to go. The stagecoach lurched to a stop outside the Medicine Bow Hotel, a 2-story wooden structure that looked like it had been hastily constructed and never quite finished. Clara gathered her worn carpetbag and stepped down onto the dusty street, her legs trembling from both the journey and the knowledge that she was about to meet the man who expected to marry her. The driver tipped his hat and pointed toward a tall figure standing outside the general store across the street. Yates Xavier was broader in the shoulders than she had imagined, his face weathered by sun and wind, a dark hat shading eyes that she could not yet see. He wore work clothes, a faded blue shirt and leather vest, denim trousers dusty from the range. As Clara crossed the street, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might crack her ribs, he turned to face her fully, and she saw that he was younger than his letters had suggested, perhaps only 26 or 27, with a strong jaw and a mouth that was neither smiling nor frowning, just waiting. "Miss Winters?" he asked, his voice low and careful. Clara opened her mouth to respond and felt the familiar blockage in her throat, the way her tongue seemed to thicken and refuse to cooperate. Why, yes," she managed, and immediately her face burned with shame. I am C.C. Clara." She waited for his expression to change, for the inevitable disappointment or discomfort. Instead, Yates removed his hat and held it against his chest, revealing dark hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of summer grass. He studied her face with an intensity that was not unkind. "I am pleased to meet you, Clara," he said simply. "Was the journey difficult?" Long, Clara said, forcing the word out. "BB, but N not T to be bad." She dropped her gaze to the wooden planks beneath her feet, waiting for him to make some excuse to tell her there had been a mistake. Every second of silence felt like a judgment. When he spoke again, his voice was gentle. "You must be tired and hungry. Would you like to get something to eat before we head to the ranch? It is about an hour's ride and the road is not smooth." Clara nodded, not trusting herself to speak again so soon. Yates picked up her carpetbag as though it weighed nothing and gestured toward the hotel. "They serve a decent meal here. Nothing fancy, but it will fill you up." The hotel dining room was small and sparse, with 4 tables covered in checked cloth. A woman with gray hair tied in a severe bun brought them coffee and plates of beef stew with thick slices of bread. Clara sat across from Yates, acutely aware of how she must appear to him, this stammering bride who could barely introduce herself. She ate slowly, keeping her eyes on her plate. "I should tell you about the ranch," Yates said, breaking the silence. "It is not large, but it is mine. I have about 200 head of cattle, a dozen horses, a cabin with 3 rooms. I have a hired hand, Tom, who helps with the heavy work. He has a wife, Maria, who lives in town but comes out once a week to help with washing and mending." Clara nodded, taking in this information. She wanted to ask questions, to know more about this life she was stepping into, but the words tangled in her mouth before they could form. Yates continued, seeming to sense her need to listen rather than speak. "The work is hard, but I do well enough. The winters are rough here, colder than Pennsylvania, I would imagine. The cabin has a good stove, though, and I have been stocking firewood since August." He paused, turning his coffee cup in his hands. "I want you to know that I do not expect anything from you right away. We can take time to know each other before we marry. There is a spare room where you can sleep." This unexpected kindness made Clara's eyes sting with sudden tears. She had expected a quick ceremony, a practical arrangement with no sentiment. Instead, this stranger was offering her time, space, consideration. "Th, thank you," she whispered, the words barely audible. Yates met her eyes, and something in his expression softened. "You do not need to thank me for basic decency, Clara." They finished their meal in a silence that was not entirely uncomfortable. And then Yates loaded her bag into a sturdy wagon hitched to 2 bay horses. He helped Clara up onto the seat, his hands firm but careful on her waist, and then climbed up beside her. As they rolled out of Medicine Bow toward the open country, Clara watched the town disappear behind them and wondered if she had made the biggest mistake of her life, or the luckiest escape. The ranch appeared gradually, emerging from the landscape like something that had grown there naturally. The cabin was larger than Clara had expected, built from solid logs with a stone chimney and a wide porch. Behind it stood a barn, a corral with several horses, and pastures that stretched toward distant hills. The setting sun painted everything in shades of gold and amber, and despite her anxiety, Clara felt something in her chest ease slightly. It was beautiful in a wild, untamed way. Yates helped her down from the wagon and carried her bag to the cabin door. Inside, the main room held a large fireplace, a wooden table with 6 chairs, shelves lined with supplies, and a rocking chair near the hearth. 2 doors led to the other rooms. "That one is mine," Yates said, pointing to the door on the left. "This one is yours." He opened the right-hand door to reveal a small bedroom with a narrow bed covered in a patchwork quilt, a washstand, and a chest of drawers. "It is not much, but you can make it however you like." Clara stepped into the room and set her carpetbag on the bed. The quilt looked handmade, the stitching careful and even. Did you make this?" she asked, touching the fabric. "My mother," Yates said from the doorway. "She passed 3 years ago, but she left me a few things. I thought you might like it." The gesture touched Clara deeply. She turned to face him, wanting to express her gratitude, but the words locked in her throat. She struggled visibly, her face contorting with the effort. I, take your time," Yates said quietly. "There is no rush." His patience only made it harder. Clara felt tears prick her eyes in frustration. "I'll like it very much," she finally managed, each word a small victory and defeat. Yates nodded. "I am glad. I will let you rest now. There is water in the pitcher, and if you need anything, just knock on my door." He left, closing the door gently behind him, and Clara sank onto the bed, her whole body shaking with exhaustion and relief, and a confusion of other emotions she could not name. She had expected judgment, had braced herself for it, but Yates Xavier had shown her nothing but kindness. She did not know what to make of it. Over the next few days, Clara settled into a tentative routine. She woke early, as she had always done, and found that Yates was already up, tending to the animals or mending fence. She cooked breakfast with the supplies in the larder, simple meals of eggs and bacon and coffee, and Yates ate them without complaint. He spoke to her about the ranch, about the cattle he was planning to drive to market in the spring, about the new foal one of the mares was expecting. He asked her questions that required only simple answers, yes or no, and never seemed bothered when she struggled to respond. On the third day, as Clara was hanging laundry on the line behind the cabin, Yates approached with something in his hands. It was a small leather-bound book. "I thought you might like this," he said. "It belonged to my mother. She liked to write down recipes and observations about the weather and such. The pages in the back are empty. I thought maybe you could use it if you wanted to write things down." Clara took the book carefully, running her fingers over the smooth leather. She understood immediately what he was offering, a way to communicate without the burden of her stutter. The thoughtfulness of it made her throat tight. Thank you," she said, and this time the words came easier. "You are welcome," Yates replied. He hesitated, then added, "I want you to know something, Clara. Your stutter does not bother me. I grew up with a cousin who had one, and I know it can be frustrating for you, but it does not make me think less of you. You can take all the time you need when you speak to me." Clara looked up at him, searching his face for any sign of insincerity, but found none. Yates Xavier meant what he said, and that realization shifted something fundamental in her understanding of him. That evening, as they sat at the table after supper, Clara opened the book and wrote carefully. "Why did you place an advertisement for a bride?" Yates read the words and considered his answer. "I have been alone for a long time," he said. "After my mother died, I realized that a ranch needs more than one person to make it a home. I wanted a partner, someone to share the work and the life with. I am not good at talking to people in town, and most of the women there already have families or are not interested in ranch life." The advertisement seemed like a practical solution. Clara wrote, "Were you disappointed when you met me?" "No," Yates said immediately. "Why would I be?" she wrote. "Because of how I talk." Yates was silent for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was firm. "I was not disappointed. I will tell you honestly, Clara, I think you are stronger than you know. It takes courage to travel across the country to meet a stranger. It takes courage to speak when speaking is hard. I admire that." Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks, and something warm and unfamiliar bloomed in her chest. She wrote, "You are kind." "I am honest," Yates corrected. "There is a difference." Over the following weeks, Clara and Yates developed a rhythm of communication that worked for both of them. Clara wrote questions and observations in the leather book, and Yates answered aloud, his voice low and thoughtful. But she also began to speak more, finding that his patience made the struggle less daunting. He never rushed her, never finished her sentences, never looked away when she stuttered. He simply waited, his green eyes steady on her face, as though he genuinely wanted to hear what she had to say. One afternoon, as Clara was kneading bread dough in the kitchen, Yates came in from the range looking troubled. "We have a problem," he said. "Some of the cattle have wandered into the north pasture near the creek. The fence there is weak, and if they push through, they will end up on government land. I need to go round them up and repair the fence, but it is at least a 2-day job." Clara wiped flour from her hands. "See, can I help?" Yates looked surprised. "It is rough work, Clara, long hours in the saddle." I see can ride," she said. It was not entirely true. She had ridden a few times as a child, but never for extended periods. Still, the thought of Yates spending 2 nights alone on the range bothered her in a way she did not fully understand. "Are you sure?" he asked, Clara nodded firmly. "All right," Yates said, a small smile playing at the corner of his mouth. "We leave at dawn." That evening, Yates showed Clara how to pack supplies for the journey: bedrolls, food, water, tools for fence repair. He saddled a gentle mare named Daisy for her and his own gelding, a powerful horse called Ranger. As the sun rose the next morning, painting the sky in streaks of pink and orange, they rode out together toward the north pasture. The land stretched endlessly in all directions, rolling prairie grass and distant mountains, the sky so vast it seemed to swallow them whole. Clara had never experienced such openness, such wilderness. In Pennsylvania, there had always been trees, buildings, boundaries. Here, there was only space and wind and the rhythmic sound of hooves on earth. Yates rode slightly ahead, scanning the horizon for signs of the missing cattle. After several hours, he slowed and pointed. "There, see that cluster of dark shapes near the cottonwoods? That is them." Clara squinted and could just make out the cattle grazing near a line of trees that marked the creek. They looked small from this distance, like toys scattered on a quilt. "We will circle around and drive them south," Yates explained. "Stay behind me and to the right. If any break away, just call out and I will handle it." The work was harder than Clara had anticipated. The cattle were stubborn and scattered easily, and keeping them moving in the right direction required constant vigilance. Her legs ached from gripping the saddle, and the sun beat down mercilessly. But there was also something exhilarating about it: the challenge and the open air and the sight of Yates working with such practiced skill. His movements fluid and confident. By late afternoon, they had the cattle contained in a temporary pen Yates had constructed near the weak section of fence. He dismounted and began unloading tools, and Clara slid from Daisy's back, her legs wobbling. "You did well," Yates said, glancing at her. "Better than I expected for your first time working cattle." Clara flushed with pleasure at the praise. They are since stubborn." Yates laughed, a sound Clara had rarely heard from him. It was warm and genuine, and it transformed his serious face into something younger, lighter. "They are indeed, but so are we." They worked until the sun began to set, Yates repairing the fence while Clara handed him tools and supplies. When it became too dark to continue, Yates built a fire and they ate cold biscuits and jerky, washing it down with water from their canteens. The temperature dropped quickly once the sun disappeared, and Clara wrapped herself in her bedroll, watching sparks from the fire drift up toward the stars. "It is different from Pennsylvania, I imagine," Yates said, settling into his own bedroll on the opposite side of the fire. Very different," Clara agreed. But be beautiful." "Yes," Yates said quietly, "it is." They lay in silence for a while, the fire crackling between them. Clara felt she should be afraid, alone in the wilderness with a man she barely knew, but instead she felt safe. Safer than she had felt in her mother's house with her stepfather's eyes following her, safer than she had felt in any of the parlors where potential suitors had dismissed her. "Yates," she said softly. "Yes. Why did you say you could listen to me all day?" She had not meant to ask, had not even realized she was going to until the words were out. It was something he had said in passing a few days ago when she had been struggling through a story about her childhood. The comment had stayed with her, turning over in her mind. Yates was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. "Because I meant it. You have interesting things to say, Clara. The way you say them does not change that. I would rather listen to you stutter through a story than hear a smooth talker say nothing worth hearing." Clara's eyes stung with sudden tears. No one had ever said anything like that to her before. Thank you," she whispered. "You keep thanking me," Yates said gently. "But you do not need to. I am just telling you the truth." Clara pulled the bedroll tighter around herself and watched the stars wheel slowly overhead, feeling something shift and settle in her heart. They finished the fence repair the next day and drove the cattle back to the main pasture. By the time they returned to the cabin, both were exhausted and covered in dust, but there was an easy companionship between them that had not existed before. They had worked together, depended on each other, and Clara felt for the first time that she might actually belong here. As autumn deepened into early winter, Clara found herself falling into the rhythms of ranch life with increasing confidence. She learned to preserve vegetables, to smoke meat, to mend harnesses and oil saddles. Yates taught her to shoot, standing behind her to guide her aim, his hands steady on her shoulders. She learned the names of all the horses, the quirks of each animal, which cows were likely to cause trouble, and through it all she talked more. The stutter remained, as she had always known it would, but its power over her diminished. Yates never flinched, never showed impatience. He listened with his full attention, as though every word she fought to produce was worth the wait. And gradually, Clara began to believe that maybe it was. One evening in late November, as snow began to dust the mountains in the distance, Yates came in from the barn looking thoughtful. Clara was cooking stew, and the cabin was warm and fragrant. She had hung curtains she had sewn from fabric Yates had brought from town, and she had arranged wildflowers in a jar on the table. The cabin felt less like a temporary shelter and more like a home. "Clara," Yates said, removing his hat and hanging it on the peg by the door. "I need to ask you something." She looked up from the pot, her heart suddenly beating faster. What is it?" "We have been living together for 2 months now," he said carefully, "and I have come to know you at least a little. I respect you, and I enjoy your company. I think we work well together." He paused, seeming to choose his words with care. "I know I brought you here to be my wife, but I do not want to pressure you. If you would rather return to Pennsylvania or go somewhere else, I will help you. But if you are willing, I would like us to marry. Not out of obligation, but because I believe we could have a good life together." Clara set down the wooden spoon, her hands trembling slightly. She had known this conversation would come eventually, but now that it was here, she felt the weight of it. Marriage would be permanent, binding. But as she looked at Yates, at his honest face and steady eyes, she realized that somewhere along the way she had stopped being afraid of him. More than that, she had come to care for him deeply, to look forward to his presence, to miss him when he was out on the range. "I would like to marry you," she said, each word clear despite the stutter. If you are really want me." "I do," Yates said simply. "Very much." He crossed the room and took her hands in his, and Clara felt the calluses on his palms, the strength in his fingers. "We will do it properly," he said. "We will go to town this weekend and see the preacher, and afterwards we can have supper at the hotel if you like." Clara nodded, a smile breaking across her face. Yates smiled back, and for a moment they simply stood there, hands clasped, the stew bubbling forgotten on the stove. They were married on a cold Saturday in late November, in the small church at the edge of Medicine Bow. The preacher was an elderly man with kind eyes who did not seem to notice or care when Clara stuttered through her vows. Yates spoke his own vows clearly and firmly, his voice never wavering, his eyes never leaving hers. Tom and Maria served as witnesses, both beaming with genuine happiness. Afterwards, they had supper at the hotel as Yates had promised, and the proprietor brought them a small cake to celebrate. Clara wore a dress she had sewn herself from blue calico, and Yates wore a clean white shirt and a string tie. They were not fancy people, but they were happy, and that was enough. That night, when they returned to the ranch, Yates carried Clara over the threshold as though she weighed nothing. He set her down gently in the main room, the fire already burning in the hearth from where Tom had lit it earlier. The cabin was warm and welcoming, and Clara felt a sense of rightness settle over her. "Are you nervous?" Yates asked gently, touching her cheek. "A little," Clara admitted. "We do not have to rush anything," he said. "We have all the time in the world," but Clara shook her head. She reached up and touched his face in return, feeling the roughness of his jaw beneath her fingers. I am ready," she said. "I want this." Yates searched her eyes, and whatever he saw there satisfied him. He leaned down and kissed her, gentle at first and then deeper, and Clara kissed him back, feeling a heat build in her body that had nothing to do with the fireplace. He lifted her again and carried her to what had been his room but was now theirs. And there, in the darkness lit only by moonlight through the window, they consummated their marriage with a tenderness and passion that left Clara breathless and amazed. Afterwards, as they lay tangled together beneath the quilts, Yates traced patterns on her shoulder with his fingertips. "I think I am falling in love with you, Clara," he said quietly. Clara's heart swelled so much it felt like it might burst. "I think I'll love you too," she whispered. Yates pulled her closer, and Clara rested her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. For the first time in her life, she felt completely accepted, completely safe, completely home. Winter came in earnest after that, bringing snow that piled in drifts against the cabin and turned the world white and silent. Clara and Yates spent long evenings by the fire, reading aloud to each other from the few books they owned, playing cards, simply talking. Clara told him about her childhood, about her father's death, about her stepfather's unwanted attention that had driven her away. Yates listened with growing anger on her behalf, but also with compassion. "You were brave to leave," he said. "Not everyone would have had the courage." "I was mostly scared," Clara said honestly. "Courage is not the absence of fear," Yates replied. "It is acting despite it." He told her about his own past, about growing up on this ranch with parents who had carved it from nothing, about watching his father die from a bad fall when Yates was 19, about caring for his mother through her final illness. He spoke of loneliness, of the burden of running the ranch alone, of the relief he felt now having someone to share it with. "I thought I would always be alone," he admitted one night, his arm around Clara's shoulders as they sat in the rocking chair together. "I am not good at talking to people, at making connections, but with you it is easy. I do not have to pretend to be anything other than what I am." "I feel the same," Clara said, snuggling closer to his warmth. The winter was harsh, but they were prepared. The cabin stayed warm, the animals were sheltered, and they had plenty of food stored. On the worst days, when the snow fell so thick they could not see the barn from the porch, they stayed inside and made love in the middle of the day, laughing at their own indulgence. Clara discovered that with Yates, she could be free in ways she had never imagined, that he delighted in her pleasure as much as his own, that intimacy could be both playful and profound. By the time spring arrived, melting the snow and turning the prairie green, Clara knew she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, noting the changes in her body, the morning queasiness, the unusual fatigue. She told Yates one evening as they were washing dishes together, her heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. "I think I am going to have a baby," she said. Yates went very still, a plate suspended in his soapy hands. Then he set it down carefully and turned to face her fully. "Truly," Clara nodded. A smile spread slowly across Yates's face, transforming it into something radiant. He picked Clara up and spun her around, laughing with pure joy. "A baby," he said wonderingly. "We are going to have a baby." "Why, yes," Clara said, laughing too, her arms around his neck. Yates set her down but kept his hands on her waist. Are you happy about it? Very happy, Clara assured him. Are you? Happier than I have ever been, Yates said. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her mouth. You have given me so much, Clara. A home, a family. I do not know what I did to deserve you. Why you listen to me, Clara said simply. When no one else would. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though the summer heat made Clara uncomfortable, and the baby seemed to enjoy kicking her ribs at the most inconvenient moments. Yates became protective to the point of being overbearing, insisting that Clara rest more, that she not lift anything heavy, that she stay out of the sun during the hottest parts of the day. Clara tolerated his fussing with good humor, knowing it came from love. Maria came out to the ranch more frequently, bringing advice and supplies, helping Clara sew baby clothes and prepare the spare room as a nursery. She was a kind woman with warm brown eyes and a practical manner, and she had delivered several babies in Medicine Bow. She assured Clara that everything looked normal and healthy. You are strong, Maria said one afternoon as they worked on a tiny quilt together. And Yates is a good man. This baby will be blessed. I hope so, Clara said, touching her swollen belly. In late September, as the leaves on the cottonwoods turned gold, Clara's labor began. It started as a dull ache in her back that gradually intensified into waves of pain that took her breath away. Yates rode into town at breakneck speed to fetch Maria, and by the time they returned, Clara was in hard labor. The birth was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. Clara had never known such pain, such exhaustion. But Yates stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her face with cool cloths, murmuring encouragement even when she screamed at him to stop talking. Maria directed everything with calm efficiency, and finally, as the sun began to set on the second day, Clara felt a tremendous pressure and then release, and a baby's cry filled the cabin. A boy, Maria announced, holding up the red, squalling infant. A healthy boy. Yates laughed, tears streaming down his face. A son. Clara, we have a son. Maria cleaned the baby and wrapped him in a soft blanket, then placed him in Clara's arms. Clara looked down at the tiny face, the miniature hands curled into fists, and felt a love so fierce it was almost frightening. This was her child, hers and Yates's, a new life they had created together. He is beautiful, she whispered. He is perfect, Yates said, leaning over to kiss both of them. Just like his mother. They named him Samuel James Xavier after both their fathers. Samuel was a good baby, healthy and strong, with Yates's green eyes and Clara's brown hair. He nursed well and slept reasonably, though the first few months were a blur of exhaustion and constant feeding. Yates helped as much as he could, walking the floor with Samuel when he fussed at night, changing soiled cloths, simply holding his son with an expression of wonder on his face. Clara's stutter had become such a normal part of their life that she rarely thought about it anymore. When she sang lullabies to Samuel, she discovered that she could sing without stuttering, the melody carrying the words smoothly. She sang to him constantly, old hymns and folk songs her mother had taught her, and Samuel would watch her with solemn eyes, occasionally making cooing sounds along with the music. One afternoon, when Samuel was about 4 months old, Yates came in from the barn to find Clara sitting in the rocking chair, nursing the baby and crying quietly. He immediately knelt beside her, concern etched on his face. What is wrong? Are you hurt? Is Samuel all right? WERF fine, Clara said, wiping her tears with her free hand. I am just happy. Yates looked confused. You are crying because you are happy. Why, yes, Clara said, laughing through her tears. I never thought I would have this. A H husband WH who L loves a me, a B baby, a H home. IITH thought IIW would always be alone, TH that no one W would W want M me B because of H how IIT talk. B but you D did. Why you CH chose M me. Yates wrapped his arms around both of them, careful not to disturb Samuel's nursing. I chose you, and I would choose you again every day for the rest of my life, he said fiercely. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Clara. Never doubt that. Clara leaned into his embrace, feeling the solid warmth of him, the love that radiated from every touch. I'll love you, she said. I love you too, Yates replied. More than words can say. The years passed in a rhythm of seasons and growth. Samuel thrived, growing into a sturdy toddler with boundless energy and his father's laugh. Clara gave birth to a daughter 2 years after Samuel, a tiny girl they named Rose Elizabeth, who had Clara's green eyes and a temperament as sweet as her name suggested. Then came another boy, Thomas William, who was born during a spring thunderstorm and seemed to carry that wild energy in his spirit. The ranch prospered under Yates's careful management. He expanded the herd, bought more land, built a larger barn. Clara kept the household running smoothly, managing the garden, the chickens, the endless cooking and cleaning and mending that came with a growing family. But it never felt like drudgery, because it was for people she loved, in a place she had made her own. Clara's stutter remained as constant as the Wyoming wind, but it no longer carried the weight of shame. Her children grew up hearing her struggle through words and thought nothing of it. Samuel, when he was old enough to understand, once asked why Mama talked differently than Papa. Yates had answered before Clara could. Your mama has to work harder to say her words, son, but that does not make them less important. In fact, it makes them more important because she cares enough to make the effort. You should always listen carefully when someone has something to say, whether they say it smoothly or not. Samuel had nodded seriously and never asked again. The children learned early to be patient when their mother spoke, to wait for her to finish, to never try to complete her sentences. And Clara learned that she could be a good mother even with her impediment, that love and patience mattered far more than perfect speech. When Samuel was 7, Rose was 5, and Thomas was 3, a family traveling through Medicine Bow stopped at the ranch to water their horses. They had a daughter about Rose's age, a shy girl who barely spoke above a whisper. After they left, the mother pulled Clara aside. I noticed your speech, the woman said, and Clara braced herself for the familiar pity or discomfort. But instead, the woman smiled. My daughter, she is shy and struggles to talk to people. But I saw her playing with your Rose, and I saw how you talked to her, how you did not make a fuss about it. It gave me hope. If you can have a family and a home and be happy, maybe she can too. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. SHCC can, she said firmly. T tell H her SHCC can be anything SHCW wants to be. D do not L let anyone M make H her F feel L less TH then. The woman nodded, her own eyes bright with tears. Thank you. You do not know how much I needed to hear that. After the family left, Clara stood on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains purple and gold. Yates came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. That was a good thing you did, he said. IIJ just told H her the TR truth, Clara replied. The truth you learned here, Yates said. With me. Clara turned in his arms to face him. After all these years of marriage, 3 children, countless days and nights together, he still made her heart race. The gray threading through his dark hair only made him more handsome, and the lines around his eyes spoke of laughter and sun, and a life well lived. Why you taught him me th that IIW was W worth L listening to, she said. That W was the greatest G gift anyone ever gave me. Yates cupped her face in his work-roughened hands. I could listen to you all day, he said, echoing the words he had spoken years ago, words that had become a sort of promise between them. Every single day for the rest of my life. He kissed her then, deep and slow, and Clara kissed him back with all the love and gratitude and passion that filled her heart. From inside the cabin, they could hear the children playing, Samuel reading to Rose and Thomas, their voices high and bright with childhood joy. This was her life now, Clara thought. This beautiful, improbable, perfect life. She had come to Wyoming as a desperate woman with a shameful secret, expecting at best a practical arrangement and at worst rejection and loneliness. Instead, she had found a man who saw past her stutter to the person beneath, who valued her thoughts and her company, who had given her not just a home but a family, not just acceptance but love. As autumn gave way to winter once more, the ranch settled into the familiar patterns of the colder months. Yates and Tom worked to ensure all the animals were protected, the feed stores were adequate, the fences were secure. Clara and the children spent more time indoors, and she taught them letters and numbers, basic cooking and sewing, the skills they would need as they grew. One evening, as snow fell softly outside and the fire crackled in the hearth, the family gathered in the main room. Yates was repairing a bridle, Samuel was practicing his letters, Rose was helping Clara knead bread dough, and Thomas was building towers from wooden blocks that he then knocked down with great enthusiasm. It was an ordinary scene, domestic and quiet, but to Clara it was everything. Mama," Rose said, her hands sticky with dough. Tell us the since story of how you met Papa." Clara smiled. Rose loved this story and asked for it often. Well, she began, and the children settled in to listen. Even Thomas abandoned his blocks to climb into his father's lap. Clara told them about the long journey from Pennsylvania, about stepping off the stagecoach in Medicine Bow, terrified and uncertain. She told them about meeting Yates, about how kind he had been when she expected judgment. She did not hide her stutter from the story, but she did not dwell on it either. It was simply a part of her, like her brown hair or green eyes. And Papa said he could listen to you all day, Samuel chimed in, having heard the story many times. Why, yes, Clara confirmed, and HEW was right. Has been listening ever since. Because Mama has important things to say, Yates added, bouncing Thomas gently on his knee. And because I love her. We love Mama too, Rose declared, throwing her doughy arms around Clara's waist. And I love all of you, Clara said, her heart full to bursting. More than anything in this W world. Later that night, after the children were asleep and the cabin was quiet, Clara and Yates lay in bed together, warm beneath layers of quilts. Outside, the wind howled and the snow continued to fall, but inside they were safe and content. You ever regret it? Yates asked suddenly. Leaving Pennsylvania, coming here to marry a stranger, Clara considered the question seriously. Not for a single moment, she said. Do you regret placing that advertisement? Never, Yates said emphatically. Getting you was the luckiest thing that ever happened to me. Clara snuggled closer to him, breathing in his familiar scent of leather and wood smoke and the outdoors. IIW was scared when I came here, she admitted. Scared UW would be disappointed. Scared UW would send me away. I could never send you away, Yates said, his arms tightening around her. Even in those first days, before I knew you well, I could see your strength, your kindness. The stutter was just part of who you are, and who you are is remarkable. Why you made me believe that, Clara said. "Be before you, IITH thought IW was be broken." "You were never broken," Yates said fiercely. "Just waiting for someone who could see you clearly." They made love then, slowly and tenderly, celebrating the bond they had forged through years of partnership and patience and genuine affection. Afterwards, as they drifted toward sleep, Clara thought about the journey that had brought her here, the fear and desperation that had driven her west, the incredible fortune that had placed her in Yates Xavier's path. The years continued to unfold in a tapestry of ordinary miracles. The children grew taller and stronger, Samuel showing an aptitude for working with horses, Rose developing a talent for drawing, Thomas proving to be fearless to the point of giving his parents constant heart attacks. The ranch expanded, and Yates hired additional help, building a small bunkhouse for the hands who came during branding and cattle drives. Clara became a fixture in the Medicine Bow community, known for her kindness and her skill with sick animals and children. Other women sought her advice, valued her opinion, never seemed bothered by her stutter. She made friends, real friends who appreciated her for who she was. The shame that had haunted her for so many years faded into a distant memory. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Yates surprised Clara by taking her to Laramie for a weekend, leaving the children with Maria and Tom. They stayed in a hotel much finer than the one in Medicine Bow, ate in a restaurant with white tablecloths and candles, walked along streets lit by gas lamps. It was a different world from their ranch, exciting and novel, but by the second day Clara found herself missing the open spaces, the quiet, the familiar rhythms of home. "Are ready to go be back?" Yates asked, reading her mood with the ease of long practice. "Why, yes," Clara admitted. "I miss the children, and the ranch." "So do I," Yates said, looking relieved. "I am glad we came, but I am glad to be going home too." On the train back to Medicine Bow, Clara rested her head on Yates's shoulder and watched the landscape roll past. "Thank you for the trip," she said. But my favorite PL place is since still home with YU. "Mine too," Yates said, kissing the top of her head. When Samuel turned 14, he began talking about wanting to learn more about horse breeding, and Yates arranged for him to spend a summer working with a rancher near Cheyenne who specialized in it. Clara was torn between pride in her son's ambition and sadness at the thought of him leaving, even temporarily. "He is growing up," she said to Yates the night before Samuel was to leave. "He is," Yates agreed, "but he will always be our boy, and he will come back. This is his home." Samuel did come back, full of new knowledge and ideas, and threw himself into helping improve the ranch's horse stock. Rose, at 12, was showing an interest in teaching and often helped the younger children in town with their lessons. Thomas, at 10, was already nearly as tall as his mother and showed every sign of inheriting his father's build and strength. Clara sometimes looked at her children and marveled that she had helped create these remarkable people. They were confident and kind, hardworking and curious, everything she had hoped they would be. And they had grown up in a household where differences were accepted, where patience was valued, where love was demonstrated every day in 1,000 small ways. One spring day, when Clara was 43 and Yates was 47, they received word that a new family had moved to a ranch about 20 miles north. Yates rode over to introduce himself and returned with news that made Clara's heart ache with sympathy. "They have a young son, maybe 8 years old," Yates reported. "He has a severe stutter. The parents seem worried about it and the boy barely speaks at all. I told them about you and they would like to visit if you are willing." "Of course," Clara said immediately. The family came the following weekend. The parents were young and clearly struggling, their clothes worn and their wagon in need of repair. The boy, whose name was Peter, clung to his mother's skirts and would not look at anyone. Clara recognized the fear and shame in his hunched shoulders, in the way he tried to make himself invisible. After the adults had talked for a while about ranching and the area, Clara crouched down to Peter's level. "Hello, Peter," she said gently. I am Mrs. Xavier, but you can call me Miss CL Clara if you like." Peter's eyes widened as he registered her stutter. He looked at her with a mixture of surprise and recognition, seeing someone who understood. "Do you like horses?" Clara asked. Peter nodded hesitantly. "Would you like to meet us some? We have a new foal. He was born last week." Another nod, this one more eager. Clara extended her hand, and after a moment Peter took it. She led him to the barn, where Samuel was working with the new foal, a leggy bay with a white star on his forehead. Peter's face lit up with wonder as he watched the foal nurse from its mother. "You can pet him if you want," Clara said. Just be gentle." Peter reached out with a trembling hand and touched the foal's soft nose. A smile broke across his face, transforming him. He is soft," Peter whispered, the words clearly difficult but important enough to say. Yes, he is," Clara agreed. "My son Samuel is training him. Maybe next time you visit, you can help." Peter looked up at her with hope blazing in his eyes, and Clara understood that she had just given him something precious. The knowledge that he was not alone, that his stutter did not make him unworthy, that there was a future where he could be accepted and valued. Over the following months, Peter's family visited regularly. Clara worked with the boy, not trying to fix his stutter but helping him gain confidence despite it. She taught him that taking time to speak was not a weakness, that people worth knowing would wait, that he had value beyond his ability to talk smoothly. She saw him slowly emerge from his shell, saw him begin to laugh and play with Thomas, saw him speak more freely even though the stutter remained. Peter's parents were grateful beyond words. "You have given us hope," his mother said to Clara one afternoon. "We thought Peter would always be isolated, always struggling. But seeing how you have built a life and a family, it shows us that he can too." "He can do anything he sets his mind to," Clara said firmly. Do not let anyone tell him different." As Clara approached her 50th birthday, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. The scared 22-year-old who had stepped off the stagecoach in medicine, Bo seemed like a different person, someone from another lifetime. That girl had been defined by her stutter, limited by it, convinced that it made her unworthy of love or happiness. But Yates had shown her a different truth. He had listened to her, truly listened, and in doing so had given her the courage to speak. Not perfectly, never perfectly, but honestly and openly. He had built a life with her where her stutter was simply one characteristic among many, no more defining than the color of her eyes or the sound of her laugh. Together, they had created a family, a home, a legacy. Their children were growing into remarkable adults, carrying forward the lessons of patience and acceptance they had learned. Samuel was engaged to a sweet girl from Cheyenne and planning to start his own ranch. Rose was preparing to attend a teaching college in Laramie. Thomas, still young but already capable, was proving to be a talented rancher who might one day take over the Xavier spread. One evening, as Clara and Yates sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in impossible colors, he took her hand in his. "You know what I am most proud of?" he asked. What?" Clara asked, leaning her head on his shoulder. "That we built all of this together," Yates said, gesturing toward the ranch, the land, the life they had made. "We started as strangers and we became partners, friends, lovers, parents. We built something that will outlast us." "B because UG gave me a chance," Clara said. "B because you saw in me." "No," Yates said gently. "Because you were brave enough to take a risk, brave enough to speak even when it was hard, brave enough to believe that you deserved happiness. I just had the good sense to recognize what was right in front of me." Clara turned to look at him, this man who had transformed her life simply by listening, by caring, by loving her without conditions. Gray streaked his hair now, and lines marked his face, but to her he was as handsome as the day she had first seen him standing outside the general store in Medicine Bow. "I'll love you," she said, the words as clear and true as they had ever been. "I have loved you for most of my life, and I will love you for WH, whatever time we have left." "And I love you," Yates said, pulling her close. "Every stubborn, beautiful, remarkable part of you. I could listen to you all day, Clara Xavier. Every single day for the rest of our lives." He kissed her as the sun slipped below the horizon, and Clara kissed him back, tasting the years and the love and the unbreakable bond they had forged. Inside the house, she could hear Thomas moving around, starting supper. In the distance, cattle lowed and horses whinnied. The wind carried the scent of sage and prairie grass, familiar and beloved. This was home. This was family. This was the life she had never dared dream of, the happiness she had thought forever beyond her reach. And it had all begun because one cowboy in Wyoming had looked at a stuttering mail-order bride and seen not a defect, but a person worth knowing, worth listening to, worth loving. As stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, Clara and Yates remained on the porch, hands intertwined, hearts aligned, grateful for every moment that had led them to this place, to each other, to the beautiful life they had built together in the wild Wyoming wilderness. Samuel married his sweetheart in the summer of Clara's 50th year, and the wedding was held at the ranch, with half of Medicine Bow in attendance. Clara wore a new dress of deep green that Yates said matched her eyes, and she watched her son pledge his life to another person with tears streaming down her face. Yates held her hand throughout the ceremony, understanding the bittersweetness of watching your child step into adulthood. The young couple settled on a piece of land Yates had purchased for them, close enough to visit but far enough to establish their own identity. Within a year, they announced they were expecting a baby, and Clara found herself preparing to become a grandmother. Rose left for teaching college that same autumn, and the house felt emptier without her cheerful presence. But she wrote letters every week, full of enthusiasm for her studies and her new friends, and Clara carefully penned responses, her writing as clear as her speech was halting. Thomas, now 18 and fully a man, became Yates's right hand on the ranch. He had his father's work ethic and his mother's kindness, and Clara often caught herself watching him with pride. He was courting a girl from town, the daughter of the blacksmith, and Clara suspected another wedding would not be far off. When Samuel's daughter was born in the spring, a healthy girl with a powerful set of lungs, Clara held her first grandchild with trembling hands and a full heart. The baby was named Clara Rose, honoring both her grandmother and her aunt, and when Clara looked into that tiny face, she saw the future stretching out in ways she had never imagined. She is perfect, Clara whispered, tears falling onto the baby's blanket. Just like her grandmother, Yates said from beside her, his own eyes suspiciously bright. Life continued its forward march, bringing joys and sorrows in equal measure. Yates's hired hand Tom passed away peacefully in his sleep, and they mourned the loss of a good friend. Maria moved to live with her daughter in Cheyenne, and Clara missed her steady presence and wise counsel. But new people came into their lives as well, new friendships formed, new connections made. Clara continued her informal work with children who stuttered, and parents from increasingly distant areas sought her out. She never claimed to be able to cure anyone, but she offered something perhaps more valuable, proof that a stutter did not have to define or limit a life. Young people who met her left with their heads held higher, their spirits lifted by the evidence that they could be happy, successful, loved. On Clara and Yates's 20th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a party at the ranch. Friends and neighbors came from all over, bringing food and gifts and warm wishes. As Clara looked around at the gathering, at the life she and Yates had built, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. Later that evening, when the guests had departed and the ranch was quiet again, Yates presented Clara with a gift. It was a new leather-bound journal, similar to the one he had given her all those years ago, but larger and finer. "For new memories," he said. "New observations, new stories." Clara opened it and saw that he had written on the first page in his careful hand, "To my beloved wife, Clara, every word you speak is precious to me. Every moment with you is a gift. With all my love, Yates." Clara's hands shook as she read it, and when she looked up at him, tears were streaming down her face. "Why you have given me so much," she managed, "and more than I see could ever repay." "You have given me just as much," Yates said, cupping her face in his hands. "You gave me a reason to come home every night. You gave me children. You gave me purpose and joy and love. I am the lucky one, Clara. I have always been the lucky one." They held each other as the stars wheeled overhead. Two people who had found in each other exactly what they needed, who had built from loneliness and hope something enduring and true. The years rolled on, bringing changes both great and small. Rose graduated from teaching college and took a position at the school in Medicine Bow, moving back home to Clara's delight. Thomas married his blacksmith's daughter in a simple ceremony, and they settled into the old bunkhouse that Yates had renovated into a small house. More grandchildren arrived, filling the ranch with noise and laughter and the beautiful chaos of young life. Clara's hair turned silver, and her hands developed the stiffness of age, but her spirit remained strong. She still cooked elaborate meals for family gatherings, still tended her garden with devotion, still sat on the porch with Yates every evening to watch the sunset. Her stutter never left her, but it had long since ceased to matter. It was simply part of who she was, like her laugh or her love of wildflowers or the way she hummed while she worked. Yates aged beside her, his dark hair going completely gray, his powerful frame becoming leaner but no less strong. They moved more slowly than they once had, but they moved together, still partners in all things. On cold mornings, Yates made sure the fire was lit before Clara woke. On long evenings, Clara read aloud to him from the newspaper or from books, and he listened with the same attention he had always given her. When Clara turned 60, Peter, the stuttering boy she had helped years before, came to visit with his own wife and children. He was a successful rancher now, confident and capable, and though he still stuttered, it no longer held him back. "Why you changed my life," he told Clara. "Why you showed me that I see could be more than my stutter. Why you did that why yourself," Clara corrected gently. "I just showed you at W was P possible." Peter shook his head. "Why you gave me hope, and that made all the D difference." As Clara watched him play with his children, saw the easy way he interacted with his family, she felt a deep satisfaction. Her own struggles had not been in vain. They had equipped her to help others, to offer comfort and understanding born of personal experience. The shame she had once felt about her stutter had transformed into something useful, even beautiful. On a crisp autumn afternoon, when Clara was 65 and Yates was 69, they rode out to the north pasture together, the same area where they had rounded up cattle all those years ago on one of their first adventures together. The landscape had changed little, still wide and wild and breathtakingly beautiful. They dismounted near the creek and sat on a fallen log, listening to the water burble over stones, watching the cottonwood leaves shimmer gold in the breeze. "Do you remember the first tea time we came here tea together?" Clara asked. "I remember everything about those early days," Yates said, taking her hand. "I remember how terrified you looked stepping off that stagecoach. I remember the first time you smiled at me, really smiled. I remember lying under the stars and thinking that maybe, just maybe, I had found something special." "Why you had," Clara said, squeezing his fingers. "We both had. You ever wonder how different things might have been if you had not answered my advertisement?" Yates asked. Clara considered this. Sometimes," she admitted. "But I cannot imagine any other life in now. This is where I belong, with you. And I cannot imagine my life without you," Yates said. "You made everything better, Clara, everything brighter and warmer and more worthwhile. I was just existing before you came. With you, I started truly living." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, two people who had shared so much that words were often unnecessary. But Clara had something she wanted to say, something she had been thinking about. "Why, Yates," she began carefully. "I want you to know that marrying you was the best decision I ever made. Why you gave me everything I needed most. Why you listened when others would not. Why you saw me when I felt invisible. Why you loved me when I thought I was unlovable. Why you changed my entire world." Yates turned to face her fully, his green eyes bright with emotion. "And you changed mine. You brought warmth and life and love into a lonely existence. You gave me children and a family. You made this ranch into a home. You showed me what it means to be truly brave." He touched her cheek gently. "I meant what I said all those years ago, Clara, and I still mean it today. I could listen to you all day, every single day. Your voice is my favorite sound in the world." Clara leaned into his touch, her heart so full of love it seemed impossible that her body could contain it. They had been married for over 40 years, had weathered storms both literal and metaphorical, had raised children and buried friends and built a life of remarkable richness. And through it all, this man had never wavered in his devotion, had never made her feel less than whole, had loved her not despite her stutter but as a complete person who happened to have one. As the sun began to sink toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, Clara and Yates rode back to the ranch together. The house that had once seemed so foreign was now the center of Clara's world, filled with memories of laughter and tears, arguments and reconciliations, ordinary moments and extraordinary joys. That evening, the family gathered for Sunday supper, as had become their tradition. Samuel and his wife brought their 3 children. Thomas and his wife brought their 2. Rose, still unmarried but deeply content with her teaching career, brought fresh bread from the bakery in town. The table could barely hold all the food, and the noise level was tremendous, with grandchildren chattering and adults trying to have conversations over the din. Clara sat at one end of the table, Yates at the other, and looked at all the faces gathered between them. These were their people, their legacy, proof that something beautiful could grow from the most unlikely beginnings. Her stutter had once seemed like an insurmountable obstacle, but here was the evidence that it had not stopped her from anything that truly mattered. After supper, as Clara was washing dishes with Rose and her daughters-in-law, her youngest granddaughter tugged on her skirt. "Gee, Grandma," the little girl said, and Clara's heart clenched as she recognized the familiar pattern of her own speech. "Why do I talk L like th this?" Clara dried her hands and knelt down, ignoring the protest of her aging knees. She looked into her granddaughter's worried face and saw herself at that age, confused and ashamed of something she could not control. "Why you have a stutter, SW sweetheart," Clara said gently. "J just L like I do." "It means S sometimes the W words G gets stuck." "W will it G go all away?" the little girl asked. "M maybe," Clara said honestly. "Or M maybe N not. B but I W want you to KN no S something V very important. Why your stutter D does not M make you L less SP special or L less L loved. Why you H have V very important TH things to S say, and P people WH who L love you W will W wait to H here TH them. L like GR Grandpa W waits F for you," the child asked. Clara smiled, her eyes filling with tears. "E exactly L like TH that." The little girl threw her arms around Clara's neck and hugged her tight, and Clara held her close, feeling the circle complete. The struggle she had endured, the shame and fear and eventual triumph, had equipped her to comfort this child in ways no one else could. Her stutter, which had once seemed like a curse, had become in some ways a gift, connecting her to others who struggled and allowing her to offer hope born of lived experience. That night, as Clara and Yates prepared for bed, moving through the familiar routine they had performed thousands of times, Clara paused to look at her reflection in the small mirror above the washstand. She saw a woman marked by age and life, silver-haired and lined, but also strong and content. This was not the face she had imagined for herself as a young woman, but it was better. It was the face of someone who had been loved well and had loved in return, who had contributed something meaningful to the world, who had found purpose and joy in unexpected places. "What are you thinking about?" Yates asked, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "H how FRW we have see come," Clara said, leaning back against his chest. "H how much W we have be built." "We have indeed," Yates agreed, resting his chin on top of her head, "and I would not change a single moment of it." They climbed into bed together, fitting into each other with the ease of long practice. Outside, the wind whispered through the cottonwoods, and somewhere a coyote called to the moon. Inside, Clara lay in Yates's arms and felt utterly at peace. "Why, Yates?" she whispered into the darkness. "Yes, my love. Thank you for choosing me." "Thank you for letting yourself be chosen," Yates replied, his voice warm with affection. "Thank you for every day, every word, every moment. Thank you for being exactly who you are." Clara smiled into the darkness, and as sleep began to claim her, she thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. The frightened girl on the stagecoach, the hopeful bride, the devoted wife, the loving mother, the supportive grandmother. Each role had shaped her, challenged her, helped her grow. And through it all, Yates had been her constant, her anchor, her greatest champion. The years that followed brought the inevitable changes that come with age. Yates developed a troublesome cough one winter that took months to fully clear. Clara's vision began to fade, making her beloved reading more difficult. They moved more slowly, tired more easily, spent more time resting and less time working. But they faced these challenges together, as they had faced everything, with patience and humor and unwavering support for each other. Thomas took over the day-to-day running of the ranch, and Yates found himself in the unfamiliar role of advisor rather than worker. It was a difficult transition for a man who had built his identity around physical labor. But Clara helped him navigate it, reminding him that wisdom and experience had their own value. "Why you have so much to teach," she told him one afternoon as they sat on the porch, watching Thomas and his sons work with the horses. Let them learn from you." Yates took her hand and squeezed it gently. "When did you become so wise?" "When I am married a good man who taught me to value myself," Clara replied with a smile. On their 50th wedding anniversary, the family threw an enormous celebration. People came from all over Wyoming, some traveling for days to attend. There were ranchers and teachers, children Clara had helped and families Yates had worked with, friends old and new. The party lasted from afternoon into evening with food and music and dancing and speeches. When it came time for Yates to say a few words, he stood with Clara beside him, his hand firmly holding hers. His voice was not as strong as it once had been, but it carried clearly in the quiet that fell over the crowd. 50 years ago, I placed an advertisement for a mail-order bride because I was lonely and needed help on the ranch. I expected a practical arrangement, a partnership based on mutual need. What I got instead was the great love of my life." He turned to look at Clara, his eyes shining. "This woman changed everything for me. She made me understand what it means to truly listen, to see beyond the surface to the person beneath. She gave me children and grandchildren, filled my home with love and laughter, stood by my side through every trial and triumph. She is the strongest, bravest, most remarkable person I have ever known, and I am grateful every single day that she chose to share her life with me." The crowd erupted in applause, and Clara felt tears streaming down her face. Yates pulled her close and kissed her forehead, and the gathering cheered louder. When the noise subsided, Clara surprised everyone by standing to speak herself. Public speaking had never been easy for her, and in recent years she had largely avoided it, but this moment felt important enough to make the effort. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice shaking only slightly. 50 years ago, IW was a frightened girl who thought SHCW was N not W worth L loving B because of how SHCSB spoke. Then, I am met Yates, and HET told him me something I have never forgotten. HES said HEC could listen to me all day. She paused, gathering her strength. Has been listening ever since, and indeed doing so. HET taught me that I had value. HEL loved me and not in SB spite of my since Stutter B, but as a whole P person who happened to have one. HEG gave me everything. A home, a family, a life B beyond my doctor dreams. I love him more Todd today than I did when we am married, and IW will love him until my last be our breath. She sat down to thunderous applause, and Yates pulled her into his arms, both of them crying openly now. Around them, their children and grandchildren gathered close, and Clara looked at each beloved face and knew that this was what true wealth looked like. Not money or land or possessions, but people who loved you, who knew your flaws and loved you anyway, who stood by you through all of life's seasons. As the party wound down and the stars emerged overhead, Clara and Yates sat together in the rocking chair on the porch, as they had done thousands of times before. They swayed gently, listening to the familiar sounds of the ranch settling for the night, wrapped in blankets against the cool evening air. 50 years, Yates murmured. It seems like both a lifetime and no time at all. I can know what you mean, Clara said. Some D days I still feel L like th that SC scared G girl since stepping off the stage coach. And some days I still feel like that lonely rancher, hoping against hope that the bride who answered my advertisement would be someone I could talk to, Yates said. I never imagined I would get someone like you. We were lucky, Clara said softly. Be both of us. We were, Yates agreed. And we made the most of that luck. We built something good, Clara, something that will last long after we are gone. They sat in comfortable silence as the moon rose, bathing the ranch in silver light. This was their legacy. Not just the land or the cattle or the buildings, but the family they had created, the love they had nurtured, the example they had set of patience and acceptance, and choosing to see the best in each other every single day. Clara lived to see her 75th birthday, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren. Her health had been declining slowly, her body finally giving in to the wear of decades, but her spirit remained strong. Yates, now 79, had slowed considerably but refused to leave her side for more than a few hours at a time. On a warm spring afternoon, as apple blossoms drifted past the windows and birdsong filled the air, Clara lay in the bed she had shared with Yates for more than 50 years, knowing that her time was growing short. Her family had gathered, filling the house with their presence, but she had asked for a few moments alone with Yates. He sat beside her on the bed, holding her hand, his face creased with age and grief but still dear to her, still the face she loved most in all the world. Do not look so sad, Clara whispered, her voice weak but steady. We had a good life. The best life, Yates said, his voice breaking, but I am not ready to let you go. I can know, Clara said, squeezing his hand with what little strength she had left. But it is tea time. I am tired, my love. Yates lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. I have listened to you every day for more than 50 years, just like I promised, and I still want more days, more words, more time. Why you gave me everything, why Yates, Clara said, her eyes filling with tears. Everything I needed, everything I wanted. Why you made me believe I was worth loving. That W was the greatest gift anyone could have given me. You were always worth loving, Yates said fiercely. Always. From the very first moment I saw you, Clara smiled, a peaceful, contented expression. I love you. I have loved you for most of my life. Thank you for listening. Thank you for everything. I love you too, Yates said, leaning down to kiss her forehead. More than words can say. You are my heart, Clara, my whole heart. Clara closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of his lips on her skin, the familiar pressure of his hand holding hers. She thought of the journey that had brought her here, from that terrified girl on the stagecoach to this moment of perfect peace. She had been loved well, had loved well in return, and that was enough. That was everything. As afternoon faded into evening, surrounded by her family with Yates holding her hand, Clara Jane Winters Xavier took her last breath and slipped peacefully away. The woman who had once thought herself unworthy of love died knowing she had been cherished beyond measure, that her life had mattered, that she had made a difference in the world simply by being herself. Yates lived for 3 more years after Clara's death, years that felt both endless and too short. He was cared for by his children and grandchildren, who made sure he was never alone for long. But everyone could see that part of him had gone with Clara, that he was merely waiting for his own time to join her. He spent his final years telling stories about Clara to anyone who would listen, making sure that the younger generations knew about the remarkable woman who had been their grandmother, who had overcome shame and fear to build a beautiful life, who had helped countless others find their own courage. He told them about her stutter, but never as a limitation, always as simply one aspect of a complex and wonderful person. On a quiet winter morning with snow falling softly outside and his children gathered around him, Yates Xavier closed his eyes for the last time. His final words were simple and true. "I am coming, Clara. Wait for me." They buried him beside Clara in the small cemetery at the edge of Medicine Bow, under a cottonwood tree with a view of the distant mountains. The headstone was simple, bearing both their names and a single inscription that Yates had requested. He listened. She spoke. Together they built a life of love. The ranch continued on, passed down through the generations, each one adding their own chapter to the story. But the legacy of Clara and Yates lived on in ways both tangible and intangible. In the way their descendants treated people with differences with patience and respect. In the family tradition of truly listening when someone spoke, regardless of how they spoke. In the understanding that love was not about perfection but about acceptance, about seeing and valuing the whole person. Years later, a great-great-granddaughter of Clara's, herself a speech therapist, would write a book about her ancestors' life. She would research the letters Clara had written, interview descendants who remembered the stories, piece together the remarkable journey of a mail-order bride who had overcome shame to find love and purpose in the wild Wyoming wilderness. The book would help countless people who struggled with speech impediments, showing them that they too could have full, rich, meaningful lives. It would tell the story of a cowboy who saw past a stutter to the person beneath, who proved that true love means listening with your heart as well as your ears, who demonstrated that the most powerful thing you can offer someone is patience and genuine interest in what they have to say. And at the heart of it all would be a simple truth, that Clara Jane Winters had stepped off a stagecoach in Medicine Bow, Wyoming in 1878, terrified that her stutter would cost her one more chance at happiness. Instead, she had met Yates Xavier, a man who told her he could listen to her all day and then proved it every day for the rest of their lives together. Together, they had built not just a ranch or a family, but a testament to the transformative power of acceptance, patience, and genuine love. Their story lived on, inspiring generation after generation to listen more carefully, to see more clearly, to love more fully, and to recognize that every person has value, regardless of how smoothly they can express it. In the end, it was not the words themselves that mattered most, but the courage to speak them and the willingness to truly hear. That was the legacy Clara and Yates left behind, and it endured long after they were gone. A gift from two imperfect people who had found in each other exactly what they needed and built from it something perfect after all.